Only about a third of American citizens have some form of estate plan, whether it be a will or a trust. Only a third actually have something prepared for their heirs and when they eventually pass. I don't know if that means that 2/3 of us think that we're going to live forever. To me, that's a very, very small amount of people who have something. And the people who do have something, they'll write up a will or trust, do it one time, and that's it. They never think that they have to adjust it again. They sign some documents, they check the box, they feel responsible. Here's the problem. Most estate plans don't fail because they're written incorrectly. No, usually the first time that they're written, it all makes sense. They fail because when life changes, the plan doesn't. And that's an issue. And just to set expectations early, because this does come up a lot, traditionally an estate plan is set up by hiring an attorney, paying thousands of dollars, and them asking you questions and setting up either a will or a trust, or sometimes both. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But there are several different ways to set up an estate plan now, and I won't necessarily get into the weeds of it to start, but we can come back to that later. For now, I want to talk about why most estate plans break when life changes and what people should be thinking about instead. Estate planning is unfortunately usually treated as a one-time event, right? But life isn't that static. There's always changes that are going to be happening. People get married, they get divorced, they move, they have kids, loved ones and relatives, they pass, health changes, retirement happens. There's going to be something that's going to require an update to your estate plan, your will or your trust. But unfortunately, some people, they don't make these changes. According to surveys, more than half of Americans with an estate plan, so a will or trust, haven't updated their plan in over 5 years, and a meaningful portion of that haven't even reviewed theirs in over a decade. And that gap between when the plan was created and where life is today is where problems start. A valid plan isn't always the same thing as a relevant one. Okay, you need to always make sure that your plan is relevant to your situation today. Let's start with family changes because this is the most common. You have marriage, divorce, remarriage, stepchildren, grandchildren, an ever-evolving family tree, if you will. These are some of the biggest stress tests made to an estate plan. I've seen situations where beneficiaries were never updated after a divorce, or if the plan never updated for a blended family at all. Not because they weren't interested in doing so, but because mainly they thought that somebody was going to do it for them, or the plan was going to update all by itself. That's not how that works. In reality, an estate plan isn't going to adapt by itself. It's only ever going to do what it's told, which is one of the most beautiful things about having an estate plan, having a trust or a will. Whatever it is, whatever the rules are that you make for the trust, that's what's going to happen after you pass, which is a beautiful thing. So even if life changes, if you don't go in and physically make a change to your estate plan, it's not going to happen overnight or just because you think about it. Documents aren't going to just know your story unless you update them. Another big issue is assets. People are going to continue to acquire accounts, whether it be retirement accounts, investment accounts, insurance can be left in an estate plan, businesses that you own, real estate that you own, any inheritance that you get, all can be left in an estate plan. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. A will can't control everything that you own. Right? Retirement accounts, insurance, those have to be left to beneficiaries and they can't be left in the will, right? And this I've actually seen recently. I had a client who unfortunately passed and I get a call from her daughter saying, hey, I was left this retirement account in my mom's will, but the beneficiary for the retirement account is my aunt. How do I get ownership of this account? Because it was clearly left to me in the will. That's how my mom wanted it, but she never updated her beneficiaries. I had to tell her the hard truth that unfortunately the beneficiary overrides any will, okay? So if your aunt was named the beneficiary on the account, even if it was left to you in the will, there's nothing that we can do. You can take her to court, but you're going to lose that battle 10 times out of 10, unfortunately. So you can have a perfectly well-written will that says one thing, but if your accounts say something different, that's super unfortunate because it's going to go to the beneficiaries of the account and not to the will. So one way to counteract this is to have a trust and leave any and all accounts to the trust. One of the more overlooked parts of an estate plan is incapacity. The estate plan isn't only just about death, It's also about what happens if I can't make decisions for myself. Who's going to make those decisions for me? According to the CDC, 1 in 4 Americans over the age of 65 will experience a stroke, and most people will experience some kind of cognitive decline. And if your plan doesn't address who's going to make the financial or medical decisions for you when this is happening, then many times families will go to court to try to settle it out. And unfortunately, I've seen it happen. This kind of tears families apart. Nobody is going to have an agreement on anything, so it's important to have somebody that you know and trust to make these financial and medical decisions for you. That's not a failure of love, it's a failure of planning, and losing control while you're alive is harder than planning for death. Another quiet risk to consider is laws and tax rules change all the time. It happens on a yearly basis, right? Estate tax thresholds shift, state laws evolve, and the plan that you had set forth 10 years ago might not be as efficient as it was back when you created it. A plan that was smart 10 years ago might still be working and legal today, but it might not be as optimal for you. And that's why an estate plan should always be looked at just like your investment plan, probably annually. When I talk about tax laws changing, there's always a plan when it comes to having a tax efficient strategy, okay? So if you were to leave your IRA or your 401k in your estate plan, just know that any of that money that's left is going to be taxed based off of your heirs' ordinary income, okay? And they have to pull that money out within 10 years now, right? Same thing goes for Roth. You still have to pull it out within 10 years, but that's not taxed anymore, right? Because you already paid your taxes on it. Now, anything is going to be acted as income during that time. So if your heirs, they pull out this money, it's going to adjust their income. So a few things that would change your estate plan when it comes to tax laws is, whether you have a Roth plan or a pre-tax retirement plan in your estate. Okay, so if you have an IRA or a 401k left to your heirs, as soon as you pass, it's going to start a 10-year window for how long they have to take the money out, right? And then they're going to owe their own ordinary income tax on it. Same thing with the Roth plan. They still have that 10-year window, but they don't have to pay taxes on it because you already did. So it's always going to be claimed as income. Okay, no matter if it's a Roth plan or a pre-tax plan, it's still going to adjust their income and, it might bump them up into another tax bracket. But these are things that you need to think about, right? So if you're living longer than you think you would have, and you don't want to put that whole tax burden on your heirs, maybe we think about doing a Roth conversion or something else to think about when it comes to the strategy. Set it and forget works for appliances, not necessarily your estate plan. Most estate plans are static, and life is not. And when these static plans collide with dynamic lives, families will always pay the price, whether they pay it in confusion, delays, or sometimes, unfortunately, even in conflict, which is something that we see all the time. Studies show that family disputes are one of the most common unintended consequences of poor or unclear estate planning, even if the family usually gets along. The issue tends to usually not be greed, although we see plenty of that. It usually tends to be ambiguity. So the better way to think about estate planning is to think of it as not just a document, but a process. Your life is always going to be changing, and you want to make sure that your plan reflects your current assets, your current family, and your current wishes. Because I know for a fact what I wanted 10 years ago is not the same thing that I want today, and I'm sure the same goes for you. If your estate plan hasn't changed while your life has, then that's a signal worth paying attention to. If you already have an estate plan, here are a few questions that I want you to ask yourself. Has my family situation changed at all? Have my assets changed meaningfully? Do my beneficiaries still reflect what I want them to be? Have I thought through incapacity, not just death? And lastly, if I were to pass tomorrow, does this plan still make sense? If any of those questions go unanswered or make you feel uncomfortable, then maybe that's a sign that it's time to review. One last thing I'll add, because it comes up all the time. Traditionally, all people think when it comes to estate planning is, let me hire an attorney, pay thousands of dollars, and create this document, and I'm all set. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for most people, the issue is never the documents. It's keeping the plan constant as life changes, okay? And part of what I do is I help people handle this in a more integrated way, and often at a fraction of the cost, and even more efficiently if this is part of an ongoing wealth management relationship. I won't turn this into a sales pitch, but just know that there are better and cheaper ways to go about your estate planning process today than there were 10 to 15 years ago. There will be a link below if you want to schedule a conversation with me. That's awesome. Happy to do so. Would love to go over your situation with you and have that conversation. Thank you for coming to today's episode of Tommy 2 Cents. Take it easy.